Hey guys, tonight we step into a city of gold, blood, incense, and sewage. You're in Constantinople, heart of the Byzantine Empire, where marble glitters under soot, where emperors declare divine rule but can't walk 5 steps without glancing over their shoulders, and where the average citizen wakes up wondering if today's breakfast will be stale barley bread or just the smell of someone else's breakfast. The sun is barely up, and already your nose is assaulted by a pungent blend of goat, wood smoke, and human waste. You live in a cramped insula, basically a glorified stone box stacked over more boxes, with a window the size of your palm and walls thin enough to hear every word your neighbor screams at his goat. The alleys below swarm with stray dogs, barefoot kids, and merchants shouting over each other like they're all trying to win an argument with God. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're watching this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push open your splintering door and step into a mosaic of chaos. The streets aren't paved, not really, just trampled layers of dirt, straw, and garbage that somehow form a road. A pig stares at you like it's judging your life choices. Chickens roam like they pay rent. Your first errand is water. Sure, Constantinople has aqueducts, thank the Romans for that, but unless you live near the Valens aqueduct or have a wealthy neighbor with a private cistern, you're lining up at dawn at the neighborhood fountain, hoping the water isn't cloudy today. Spoiler: it is. Your stomach growls. Breakfast is probably some barley porridge or leftover lentils. Meat. That's a fantasy unless it's a holy feast day or your cousin's wedding. You chew slowly, savoring each tasteless bite, pretending it's honeyed figs or lamb stew. It's not. It's sadness on a spoon. Meanwhile, your neighbor Argyris is shouting again. Yesterday, it was his wife's sandals. Today, it's taxes. The Imperial Tax Bureau, bless their hearts, has creative ways of wringing gold from stone. Got a small business? You're taxed. Own land. Taxed. No land. Still taxed. And yes, they tax your olive trees and the oil they produce. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine tax system was brilliantly efficient or just sadistically inventive. Still, you're lucky you live inside the city walls. Out in the countryside, villagers sometimes pay taxes in kind, meaning chickens, grain, or their own backs when conscripted for emergency labor. Backbreaking work, zero pay, and a bonus chance of dying from tetanus? Where do you sign up? A bell tolls from one of the hundreds of churches dotting the city skyline, some tiny and wooden, others grand and domed. Religion is everywhere here, not just in stained glass and incense. People cross themselves at passing icons, argue about Christ's nature over wine, and blame every stomach ache on divine punishment. One block over, a woman smears crushed basil on her door to ward off demons. A priest walks past and mutters something under his breath that suspiciously sounds like, "Good luck with that." You head toward the forum for work. Or maybe you're a tradesman, selling dyed wool or bronze trinkets. Either way, you're navigating a dense thicket of languages, accents, and smells. Armenians shout about carpets, Syrians about spices, and Latin mercenaries about everything else. The empire is a multicultural stew, and Constantinople is the bubbling pot about to boil over. Oh, and while you're minding your stall or carrying amphory, don't forget to glance at the basilica cisterns beneath your feet. Underneath this glittering city lies a hidden underworld of water, darkness, and the occasional wandering fish. Some swear they've seen shadows down there that don't belong to fish. Midday heat creeps in. You wipe sweat from your brow, which smells faintly of garlic and desperation. You pass a public bathhouse. Sure, they exist, but don't get too excited, those are mostly for the rich. If you're lucky, you'll get one cold water rinse this week, and if you're unlucky, it'll be while dodging a street brawl over moldy bread. By now, your feet ache. Your stomach whines again. It's time for lunch. Maybe an onion, maybe some old olives, maybe just staring longingly at a baker's stall and inhaling with purpose. You sit on a broken step near a crumbling arch and pretend it's a bench at a modern cafe. A cat curls near your feet, and for a second, life almost feels peaceful. Then someone nearby yells about the emperor's latest edict. Apparently, there's a new tax on bricks. Or bathwater. Or maybe both. Rumors swirl faster than the Bosphorus current. Some claim the emperor's gone mad, others that he's a saint. Most agree he has no idea how bad things are down here in the alleys. The palace looms in the distance, all domes and gold and silk. You try not to look at it too long, it's like staring at the sun. Inside those walls, history pivots with every paranoid whisper, but out here in the dirt and sweat, your own story trudges on, one cracked sandal at a time. As night creeps in, torches flicker and shadows stretch across the mosaics. You trudge home, body sore, soul wearied, wondering if tomorrow will bring more work, or just another riot, fire, or plague. Either way, you'll be there, just trying to make it to the next bowl of porridge. You wake to shouting again, not the usual neighborly goat-related quarrels, but something more serious. A different tone. You recognize it immediately. It's the sound of fear, brewing like a storm in the city's stone belly. You shuffle to the window, if you can call a fist-sized hole a window, and squint at the street. Smoke. That's never good. A riot's brewing. Again. It's not rare in Constantinople. In fact, public unrest is practically a hobby here. And today, it might be about the chariot races. Yes, you heard that right. Chariot races. The city's greatest sporting obsession, the blues versus the greens. Historians still argue whether the teams were just fan clubs or full-blown political factions, but what's certain is that your life can depend on who you cheer for. Let's say you're a blue. You wear the right color scarf, mutter the correct slogans, and avoid the green neighborhoods like they're infested with plague. But maybe your cousin married into a green family, or your landlord switched allegiance last week to dodge a fine. Loyalty is as slippery as the marble streets after rain. Anyway, the Hippodrome, Constantinople's roaring coliseum of madness, sits like a coiled dragon in the heart of the city. 50,000 spectators crammed into stone benches, all screaming for blood and speed. You've been there once, jammed between a baker and a man who smelled like fermented onions. The air was electric. And violent. Someone threw a chicken. But here's the thing, these sports riots aren't just drunken brawls. They morph into political uprisings, religious crusades, or outright revolutions depending on the mood. The infamous Nika riots of 532? Half the city burned, and thousands died. And why? Because Emperor Justinian tried to crack down on corruption and angered both the blues and the greens. Bad move. Real bad. The people united, temporarily, and went full scorched earth mode. You weren't there, of course. But your grandfather was. He lost his arm to a falling statue. Now he waves with his left hand and curses emperors under his breath. He says the fire devoured everything except the emperor's arrogance. And honestly, not much has changed. The tension still lives in the cobblestones. One wrong decree, one crooked official, and boom, torches, pitchforks, and the occasional tax office on fire. You keep a go-bag ready, just in case. Not that you own much, maybe a loaf of bread, your best sandals, and a small bronze icon of Saint Demetrius. For luck. As you walk through the still smoking street, you notice fresh graffiti scrawled on a wall, "Down with the Greens," in hurried charcoal script. You sigh. That wall was just repaired last week. The city's in a constant loop. Build, riot, burn, rebuild. There's a reason everyone knows someone in masonry. You duck into a shadowed alley and take a shortcut through the back of the butcher's quarter. Flies buzz like gossiping ants. You nod to a weary woman scraping sinew off a slab of meat. She nods back. Everyone keeps their eyes low and mouths shut today. When unrest brews, accusations fly faster than arrows. And if you're on the wrong side of the story, you could be dragged into it, even if your only crime was being outside at the wrong time. You reach the neighborhood shrine and make the sign of the cross. Not because you're especially pious, but because it's habit and insurance. Religion in the Byzantine world isn't just faith, it's survival. Icons are everywhere. In homes, shops, even strapped to military standards. You once saw a sailor wear an icon like a brooch, claiming it kept sea monsters away. You didn't ask questions. But faith, here, is also fractious. Arguments about theology can spark brawls just as easily as taxes or sports. Monophysites, Nestorians, iconoclasts, you try to keep up, but honestly, it all blurs into a fog of Latin-sounding shouting. Historians still argue whether the average citizen really understood these theological schisms or just picked sides like they picked chariot teams. The current bishop is holding firm against heresy, but rumors say another council might shift everything again. It's like trying to read a sacred text in a whirlwind. You remember last year when your cousin was beaten half dead for saying Christ had one nature instead of two? Or was it the other way around? Either way, it wasn't worth the black eye and the broken ribs. You pass a wine shop. The owner, Thanos, who always smells like he bathed in grape juice, calls out to you, offering a drink on the house. You accept, not because you're thirsty but because you need news. And gossip travels better with wine. He leans in close. The Greens started it, he whispers, eyes darting. They were protesting grain prices. Then some blues showed up. Then someone punched a priest. And now. He gestures vaguely at the smoke above the rooftops. You sip the watered wine, listening. Thanos is probably exaggerating, but only slightly. Grain prices are always a powder keg. The emperor can promise heavenly order, but if your bread costs double and tastes like brick dust, people notice. Back in the day, emperors used to host huge bread giveaways. Part politics, part survival tactic. Today though, you're lucky if the state grain rations arrive unspoiled. Last month, a shipment was so rotten even the rats said, "No thanks." You thank Thanos and head back into the street. It's calmer now. City guards are out, marching in pairs with that look of exhausted authority, like substitute teachers who've lost all hope. You nod respectfully and keep moving. Getting noticed by the wrong soldier on the wrong day is a shortcut to bruises and paperwork. By the time the sun leans westward, the streets feel more normal again. Well, Constantinople normal. Someone plays a lyre near the fountain. Children chase each other with reeds. A donkey has inexplicably climbed onto a cart and refuses to get down. You smile. Maybe things will settle. Until next time. You reach your insula just as your neighbor's goat tries to chew your tunic. You swat it away and step over a puddle that you really hope is just rainwater. As you climb the creaky stairs, your bones ache from another day of walking on metaphorical eggshells and literal filth. You collapse onto your bed, more straw than cushion, and exhale. Your city is alive. Not gently, not gracefully, but intensely. And whether it's chariot fans flipping wagons, or theological brawls in the bakery, or a spontaneous street festival turning into a tax revolt, one thing's for sure, there's never a dull moment in the Byzantine Empire. You don't hear the clang of the city gates at night, but you know they're closed. Thick ironwood reinforced with bronze, each door heavy enough to crush a cart. When the sun dips, Constantinople becomes a fortress, less a city of God, more a paranoid ant bolting 6 locks and peeking through the curtains. But even behind walls so famous they've got their own fan club. Yes, we're talking about the Theodosian walls. You never feel entirely safe. Because here's the unspoken truth. Sometimes, the danger doesn't come from outside. Tonight, you try to sleep. You shift on your mattress, which is really just a sack of hay that smells faintly of mildew and goat. You count the soft clicks of rats under the floorboards like it's a lullaby. Then you hear it, a scream. Not the blood-curdling kind, just the startled yelp of someone getting mugged or discovering that their house is on fire. Again. You roll over and mutter a quick prayer. It's the third scream this week. The Byzantine Empire is many things. Devout, artistic, terrifyingly bureaucratic. But safe? Not really. Especially if you're poor. Or female. Or too clever. Or too foreign. Or just unlucky. You've heard tales of the Varangian Guard, those towering, axe-wielding Norsemen sworn to protect the emperor. The irony is, while they might protect the palace, they're not patrolling your alleyway. That's left to the City Watch, a mismatched collection of part-time thugs, bribe-happy veterans, and the occasional guy who wandered in looking for free bread. The city's real police force? Gossip. And maybe your neighbor Irene, who somehow knows everyone's business and isn't afraid to shout it from her balcony at 2 a.m. Crime is low-level but constant. Pickpockets on every corner, black market scroll dealers, icon thieves, fraudulent relic hawkers. You once saw a man try to sell St. Andrew's actual molar, twice. Historians still argue whether relic trade was a source of genuine faith or just the medieval version of QVC. You lean toward the latter. Then there's the fire risk. Everything burns. Fast. Candlelight, open hearths, cloth awnings. It's a city built for combustion. And no, there's no fire brigade. Just neighbors with buckets and a lot of yelling. Last year, your cousin's house caught fire from an overturned oil lamp. The flames spread in minutes. By the time help arrived, 3 homes were ash, and the priest was trying to bless the smoke away. You wake early and step into a foggy street that smells like fish guts and morning regret. The baker is already setting up. You wave, eyeing the blackened edge of his oven. His son died in a fire last winter. Nobody talks about it. Too common. As you pass a cistern, a public water source, not a fancy one, you pause to wash your face. The water's cold and carries a hint of rust, but it's better than nothing. You glance at a man kneeling beside you. His face is bruised. Robbery. Drunken brawl? Imperial tax enforcer getting frisky? Who knows? Nobody asks questions this early. While walking, you nearly step on a rotting pile of something. It used to be food. Maybe. A pigeon pecks at it and glares at you. You tiptoe around. Sanitation, you see, is more of a suggestion in this empire. Chamber pots are emptied straight into the street with a warning shout, "Watch out below," if you're lucky. You've learned to walk close to buildings, not beneath windows. And yet, despite all of this, there's a strange comfort in the chaos. People look out for each other. Sometimes. You slip a coin to an old man playing the kithara, and he blesses you in Greek and Latin, just to cover all bases. You pass a healer's booth, a makeshift stall draped in fading linen. The doctor offers leeches, incense, and a foul-smelling salve he swears came from Mount Athos. You don't stop. Last time you did, your rash got worse. There's a saying in the city, better to pray it away than give it to a healer. Of course, there are hospitals, if you're lucky or connected. The Byzantines did pioneer some impressive medical care, especially through religious institutions. Monasteries ran what we'd now call clinics. But you've got boiled nettle tea and hope. You glance down a side alley and see 2 men arguing in whispered tones. One's holding a dagger that catches the morning light. You keep walking. Not your problem. Not today. Back on the main street, a priest leads a small group of worshippers in a procession. Their chant floats over the city's noise like incense on breeze. It's oddly beautiful. For a moment, you forget the rats, the fires, the muggings. Then one of the chanters trips on a broken cobblestone and faceplants. The magic fades. You reach the neighborhood square, where vendors are setting up for the market. You recognize a few faces, Kasha the honey seller, old Thanos with his goat cheese, and a woman who insists her cabbages cure melancholy. You buy a stale roll for breakfast and chew it slowly, staring at the cracked marble of the fountain. People talk about the glory of Constantinople, and sure, it's here. The Hagia Sophia's dome glows in the sun like it's been dipped in fire. The mosaics glitter even in shadow. The libraries, the palaces, the art, all incredible. But in your part of town, the glory's faded. Like gold paint peeling off a wooden icon. You admire it from a distance, never expecting it to reach you. Still, you endure. Because what else can you do? This is your city. Your empire. It's crumbling in places, sure. But it's also alive. Vibrant. Loud. Terrifying. And beautiful. Later that evening, you sit by your window, listening to the lull of distant chanting and the closer sound of someone arguing about chickens. The moon hangs over the skyline like a polished shield. Somewhere, a couple laughs. Somewhere else, a man groans in pain. You wrap yourself in your cloak and close your eyes. You made it through another day in the Byzantine Empire. Morning comes again, because of course it does, and you greet it with the stiff ache of someone who's slept on straw. You stretch, crack your neck, and remind yourself, like you do every day, not to take deep breaths. Not unless you enjoy the aroma of donkey sweat, boiling fish, incense, and something that smells suspiciously like cat pee. You step into the courtyard just as a messenger boy dashes past, waving a rolled-up decree and shouting something about new taxes. Again. You sigh. The Byzantine Empire isn't so much ruled as it is administrated vigorously by layers and layers of officials who seem to invent new stamps just for fun. See, taxation here isn't a once-a-year formality, it's a lifestyle. Every cart that rattles down a street might owe a toll. Every shop could be taxed on door width. You once overheard someone say they paid a wind privilege fee because their awning fluttered too far into the street. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine bureaucracy was admirably advanced or just gleefully sadistic. You know where you stand. And it all comes from the top. The emperor. A divine figure in a fancy robe, surrounded by gold and incense and advisors who definitely never tell him the truth. On paper, he's God's chosen representative on earth. In practice, he probably hasn't walked through your neighborhood since the last comet appeared. The palace. Oh, the palace. It's basically a glittering city within the city. Walls upon walls. Gardens. Courtyards. Secret tunnels. You've heard the rumors. Some say there's a fountain that pours wine. Others whisper about eunuchs who've ruled from behind the throne. Most of that sounds made up, but then again, this is Byzantium. Truth is always wearing 3 masks. Still, you can't help but admire the sheer scale of it all. The emperor doesn't just have a throne, he has the throne, set beneath a golden canopy, surrounded by mechanical birds and a roaring bronze lion that supposedly moves. Foreign envoys tremble before it. You try not to roll your eyes. Must be nice, having a lion that roars instead of neighbors who do. But the bureaucracy under him. That's the real beast. Your cousin, Nikephoros, tried to open a spice shop last year. He needed permits from 3 different offices, all with overlapping jurisdiction and contradictory requirements. One demanded a proof of piety letter from a priest. Another said he needed a certificate stating that his pepper wouldn't corrupt morals. He gave up and went into fishing. Got fined for using the wrong net. And yet, somehow, all these taxes don't seem to go toward fixing the roads, or paying the city watch more than a handful of coppers. But there's always enough coin for more purple silk and military parades. Priorities. You pass a public notice board on the way to the market. A new imperial edict has been nailed up, but someone's already drawn a mustache on the emperor's face. You chuckle until you remember. Mocking imperial authority can get you exiled. Or blinded. Or worse. You wipe the smile off your face. Speaking of punishments, justice in the empire is a strange, theatrical thing. Minor infractions. Fines, mostly. Unless you insult a bureaucrat. Then it's stocks. Or public whipping. Or your tongue might vanish in the night. Literally. You once saw a man accused of slandering a minor official. His punishment? He had to walk the Misi, Constantinople's main street, wearing a donkey mask and bells, while children pelted him with spoiled fruit. Harsh. Maybe. But undeniably memorable. You reach the market just as an imperial official strides in with an entourage. He's tall, powdered, and wears more jewelry than your aunt on feast day. He announces a new grain price cap, declares it merciful, and is gone in a swirl of silks and sarcasm. The grain seller immediately raises his prices anyway. You shake your head. Nothing's changed. Everyone complains about corruption, but you know it's baked into the system. Want your water turned back on? Pay a courtesy coin. Need a spot for your stall in the market? Offer a bribe, or as they politely call it, a gift of appreciation. Even monks accept donations for blessings of favorable weather. It's not evil, per se. Just expected. Historians still debate whether this Byzantine red tape held the empire together longer or slowly strangled it. You suspect both are true. Like someone building a magnificent marble temple on top of a swamp. Later in the day, you walk by the Senate building, less a place of power these days and more a theater for wealthy men to argue about tax exemptions. It's a relic. You pause by the entrance and look up at the worn statues. One of them is missing a nose. You wonder if it was stolen or fell off from sheer embarrassment. Still, the empire survives. Wobbly, wheezing, occasionally brilliant. It survives through sheer momentum, like a creaky cart going downhill, too heavy to stop, too unpredictable to steer. As the sun dips lower, the bureaucracy winds down. Officials head home. Scribes put away their quills. Scrolls are sealed and locked away like sacred relics. Somewhere in the palace, a eunuch probably whispers to a general, who whispers to a noble, who whispers to the emperor. And tomorrow, another tax will be born. You return home and find a notice nailed to your door. A tax adjustment. Apparently, your roof now counts as an elevated living privilege. You consider tearing it down. Or just living without one. Might be cheaper. You sit at your tiny table, pour yourself a cup of watered-down wine, and sigh. You made it through another day of rules, stamps, and mysteriously expensive bread. The empire is still here. And so are you. You're woken before dawn by the sound of boots, lots of boots, marching past your window. Not again, you groan, as you pull on yesterday's tunic and peek outside. Yep. Another imperial recruitment. Soldiers this time. Fresh-faced boys led by grizzled veterans in rusted mail, stomping their way to the edge of the city. Where they're headed, no one quite knows. East, probably. It's always east. In the Byzantine Empire, war isn't just a career path, it's a rite of passage, a burden, and a gamble with very long odds. And the worst part? You don't always get a choice. If you're poor, unlucky, or just happen to walk past the wrong magistrate on the wrong day, congratulations, you're a soldier now. Pack a cloak, kiss your chickens goodbye. You remember when your brother Theodulos was conscripted. He left with a wooden sword and a sack of onions. Came back 3 years later with half an ear, a limp, and stories that still wake him up screaming. The empire doesn't ask if you're ready. It assumes you are. Historians still argue whether the Byzantine military was a marvel of strategy or a chaotic patchwork of last-minute miracles. It honestly depends on the year. One year you've got brilliant generals like Belisarius storming Italy with a few thousand men and way too much confidence. The next, you've got underfed peasants being told to hold the line against mounted archers who could probably shoot a coin off your nose. And let's not forget the themes. Not theme as in catchy music, but land-based military districts. The idea is simple. Citizens get land, and in return, they serve when needed. Sounds fair, until you realize your land is 3 goats and a rock, and when needed, turns out to mean all the time. Of course, if you're lucky, or born rich, you can buy your way out of fighting. Pay a substitute to serve in your place. The empire doesn't mind, as long as someone shows up to get stabbed. You walk toward the forum, hoping to trade for some olive oil, and pass a young man in military garb arguing with his weeping mother. She clutches a small cross, he clutches a spear like it might explain things. Neither is winning. You keep walking. The empire is always at war with someone. Arabs, Bulgars, Normans, Persians. Pick a direction, there's an enemy. You once heard someone say, "We're surrounded by barbarians." To which your uncle replied, "We are the barbarians. Just better dressed." War touches everything. Prices rise, men vanish, widows multiply. Even weddings are weirdly military. Some noble families arrange them based on military rank and campaign spoils. You once went to a wedding where the groom's dowry was a captured warhorse and 3 Armenian shields. Romantic. Quirky tidbit of the day. Did you know some Byzantine generals carried tiny relics into battle? Like pieces of saints' bones in their helmets. One even claimed a splinter of the true cross made him immune to arrows. Spoiler alert, it didn't. You reach the agora, which today feels more like a gossip festival than a marketplace. Everyone's buzzing about the emperor's latest strategic maneuver. Something about retreating to better defend the capital, which is code for, we lost a city and don't want to talk about it. And yet, in spite of all the chaos, Byzantine warfare is weirdly advanced. Greek fire, for instance. You've never seen it, but you've heard about it. A flaming liquid that sticks to ships and keeps burning even on water. Historians still debate its exact composition. The state guarded the recipe like it was Zeus's own barbecue sauce. You stop by a spice merchant who's also a veteran. His left eye twitches when he talks about the siege of Antioch. We held out for 6 weeks, he says. Lived on boiled leather. My friend tried to eat his boot. You nod, unsure if this is the joke part or the trauma part. Sometimes it's both. You ask him if he'd do it again. He snorts. Only if I come back as the emperor's horse. Fair point. Even religion is tied to war. Priests bless armies before battle, and if you win, it's because of divine favor. If you lose, clearly, someone sinned. Convenient. You remember a time when a campaign failed and the church blamed immodest women and idle dancers. Your cousin Sophia is still salty about that. Oh, and let's talk uniforms. If you're expecting polished armor and matching cloaks, don't. Most soldiers look like they robbed a scarecrow. Helmets don't match, tunics are patched with whatever cloth's available, and swords? Some are so nicked they might be safer for the enemy. But there's one upside: camaraderie. Soldiers, despite the madness, form bonds that last lifetimes. Your brother still meets up with his old unit once a year. They sit in a circle, drink questionable wine, and retell the same 3 jokes about a siege, a goat, and a collapsing tent. You don't get it. But they laugh every time. As the sun sets, you pass a caravan of wounded soldiers returning from the Eastern Front. They're battered, bruised, and somehow still singing. You offer one a piece of bread. He grins, missing a few teeth, and mumbles, better than field rations. He limps on. You head home with your olive oil and a little more gratitude. Because today, you weren't recruited. Today, you didn't have to fight. And in Byzantium, that's a win. You're halfway through a bowl of watery lentil stew when you hear a knock at the door. Not a friendly one. It's the kind of knock that says, "We're not here to borrow sugar." You set the bowl down with a sigh and open the door to find 2 tax officials flanked by a notary and a donkey. The donkey, incidentally, looks just as exhausted as you feel. Taxes in the Byzantine Empire? Oh, they're not just a civic duty, they're a full-body experience. Byzantine taxation isn't just a matter of pay what you owe. It's more like, we'll guess what you owe, triple it, argue about it, and then fine you for being difficult. The empire has a tax for everything. Land tax. Of course. Hearth tax. Naturally. Trade tax. Obviously. A shadow passed over your vineyard yesterday? There's probably a tax for that too. And don't forget the Erechon tax, which roughly translates to, well, no one really knows. Historians still argue whether it was a legal tax or just a bureaucratic prank that got wildly out of hand. You gesture to the ledger you've been updating, painstakingly listing your goats, your chickens, and the sad little patch of land that barely grows anything except weeds. The official inspects it with a grunt, clearly unimpressed by your weed-to-cabbage ratio. He frowns, makes a few scribbles, and doubles your estimate. Just like that. You're tempted to protest, but protesting tax collectors in Byzantium? That's like challenging a beehive to a thumb war. You'll lose, and it'll be itchy. Instead, you nod and mumble something about having a coin or 2 saved under the floorboards, which you do not. Not anymore. You spent those on thread to repair your sandals. It's not that the system is broken, it's just been creatively interpreted for centuries. You've heard stories of corrupt officials who demand taxes in advance, and then again once the harvest comes in. One guy even taxed a village's river because the fish were imperial property. True. Maybe. But it sounds just believable enough. You hand over your payment in worn bronze coins and 2 small jars of pickled onions. The taxman accepts them with the enthusiasm of a man who hasn't enjoyed life since Emperor Heraclius. The donkey sniffs the onions and sighs, like it's been through this before. The Byzantine treasury, of course, needs your money. Wars don't fund themselves, after all. Neither do bureaucrats, bishops, palaces, or those intricate golden icons that line the Hagia Sophia like some sort of divine jewelry store. And yet, you wonder, where does it all go? Historians still debate whether the imperial tax system kept the empire afloat or slowly choked it to death. Maybe both. Like a really tight belt on a starving man. Quirky tidbit: one emperor, Anastasius, was actually praised for his fiscal reforms. He supposedly left the treasury with a massive surplus and even abolished the unpopular Chrysargeron, a tax on artisans and merchants. People loved him for it. Which, of course, means he was never invited to any future budget meetings again. Back in your modest home, you count what's left: 3 onions, half a loaf of barley bread, and a growing resentment toward anyone wearing official boots. Your neighbor stops by and whispers that she's heard a new land assessment is coming. She's already hiding her best sheep behind a wall of hay and calling it a visiting cousin. Desperate times, creative measures. Of course, if you're a noble, taxes are more of a suggestion. The aristocracy has loopholes wide enough to sail a grain ship through. They claim exemptions, bribe officials, or donate just enough to the church to make it awkward to press charges. Some even own entire villages outright and tax the peasants themselves. Nothing like outsourcing your exploitation. The empire occasionally tries to rein this in, issuing decrees, launching investigations, sending inspectors. But by the time the paperwork catches up, the gold's already been melted into a holy chalice somewhere in Cappadocia. Still, it's not all doom and debt. Some years, the harvest is good, the officials look the other way, and you might even have a spare coin to buy honey. Once, during a festival, you had honey and cheese. It was so decadent you worried you might get taxed just for enjoying yourself. You glance up at the icon hanging above your door, Christ Pantocrator, watching with that familiar mix of sternness and cosmic patience. If you can multiply loaves, you mutter, a few coins would be nice too. There's also the issue of in-kind taxation. Don't have coins? No problem, just pay in grain, cloth, pigs, wax, or, apparently, onions. The empire will take whatever it can get. Sometimes, you suspect they'd accept your grandmother if she were still mobile. Of course, these payments don't always reach Constantinople. You've heard tales of entire wagons of goods accidentally going missing. Bandits, storms, or that mysterious black market middleman known only as Uncle Nikos. As you settle in for the evening, you hear the tax officials visiting another house. There's shouting, a slamming door, and the unmistakable sound of a jar breaking. Someone just lost their olives. You take a deep breath and exhale slowly. Today, at least, they took your money but not your dignity. Although you're pretty sure they're coming back for that next week. Still, you can't help but marvel at the sheer tenacity of the system. It bends, it breaks, it reforms, it reinvents. Through civil wars, plagues, invasions, and famines, the Byzantine tax machine keeps humming, like a mule that's forgotten how to stop walking. You spoon the last of your stew, savoring the quiet. Tomorrow, the market. Maybe you'll find someone to trade wool for figs. Or maybe you'll just find another tax. You wake up to the sound of bells, soft at first, then louder, echoing across the stone and clay rooftops. It's not time for prayer. It's not even time for trade. It's time for danger. Those bells are the empire's equivalent of a siren, and when they toll out of rhythm, it means only one thing. Something wicked this way comes. Raids. Again. Life in the Byzantine countryside is a lesson in vigilance. One day, you're tending your olive trees or making goat cheese. The next, you're grabbing your children and hiding in a dry well while horsemen thunder past, swords raised, shouting in a language you don't understand. The Byzantines fought enemies on all sides: Persians, Bulgars, Slavs, Arabs, Normans, and eventually the Turks. It's a geopolitical buffet of trouble. Your village, snugly nestled in Anatolia, just happens to lie in the path of just about every invader. Lucky you. You scramble to the church tower, the highest point in the village. From there, you can see dust rising along the road, dark clouds kicked up by hooves. Riders. Armed. Fast. They'll be here before noon. You've been through this before. Too many times to count. The local theme system, that once innovative Byzantine military model, should protect you. In theory. It assigns land to soldiers so they're close to home and can defend it quickly. But now, most of the best men are off fighting elsewhere. Constantinople calls, and the front lines are always shifting. So it's up to you, and whatever the village militia can scrape together. 2 pitchforks, a half-rusted sword, and Nikos, who swears his sling can still hit a duck at 30 paces. You don't trust Nikos. Or his sling. Or his eyes, for that matter. Historians still argue whether the theme system declined because of centralization, or because the empire simply ran out of soldiers willing to die for goat-strewn hillsides. Either way, you're not counting on any cavalry. You rush home to gather the essentials: bread, water, your mother's icon of St. George, and a bundle of dried figs you were saving for your son's name day. He doesn't understand why you're shaking. He's only 6. To him, this is an adventure. To you, it's Tuesday. There's a designated cave nearby, an old smuggler's hideout. That's where the village hides during raids. You make your way there, moving fast but low, your heart pounding like it's part of the percussion section. The cave smells like damp straw and panic. From the mouth of the cave, you watch your home disappear behind trees. Smoke curls upward. Someone's barn. Or maybe the bakery. Not the bakery. Please, not the bakery. The invaders pass through quickly, like a knife through bread. They take food, tools, valuables. Sometimes livestock. Sometimes people. Your neighbor's daughter didn't return last time. No one says her name anymore. You don't ask questions. You just pray. And yet, there's a rhythm to all of this. A cycle. Rebuild. Recover. Repeat. You've patched your roof so many times it looks like a mosaic. Your oxen know the drill. When the bells ring, they head toward the thickets on their own. In one rare moment of dark humor, your brother once joked that Byzantines don't have seasons. They have siege, raid, rebuild, and Lent. The empire does try to help. Sometimes. There's an official compensation system for raided towns, assuming you fill out all 6 forms, bribe the right scribe, and wait 9 months. One time, you were compensated with a broken plow and a goat that turned out to be a biter. Quirky tidbit: the city of Thessaloniki once trained carrier dogs, not pigeons, but actual dogs, to deliver messages and alerts. They wore tiny saddlebags and everything. You wish your village had that. Right now, you'd settle for a fast-running chicken. Later, once the raiders are gone and the smoke fades, you creep back. The village is singed but standing. Some homes burned. Some ransacked. The church still has its bell, though it's cracked now. Somehow, that feels symbolic. A man sobs quietly over a broken loom. Another curses as he counts missing sheep. A child finds a burnt doll and clutches it like treasure. You kneel by what's left of your home. Your bread is gone. But the icon of St. George? It's still there. Slightly scorched, but whole. Historians still debate whether the empire's decentralized defense system saved more lives or doomed the borderlands to constant suffering. The truth probably depends on whether you lived behind city walls or in a valley like yours. But here's the thing, you do survive. You always do. And over time, you get good at it. You hide valuables in underground jars. You build traps, crude but effective. You teach your kids which herbs help calm a horse or treat burns. And you learn to listen, to the bells, the wind, the way the birds fall silent just before something awful arrives. One time, a traveling monk passed through and said that suffering refines the soul like fire purifies gold. You offered him water and asked if gold ever got tired of being purified. He just smiled and blessed your roof. You're tired. But you're still here. Tonight, the village gathers what's left. There's a silence over the square that speaks louder than any sermon. You trade glances with your neighbor. No words. Just the mutual understanding of people who've crawled through ashes and found a way to laugh again. Your son asks if the raiders will come back tomorrow. You tell him no. It's probably a lie. But lies have their place, especially when they come with a warm blanket and a bedtime fig. You tuck him in and look out the window. The moon is out, clear and bright, indifferent as ever. The wind whistles low through the trees, like it's trying to warn you of something. Or maybe just singing an old lullaby. You wake up to the scent of fish, and not the good kind. This is the kind of briny, sour, suspicious aroma that clings to clay pots and lives rent-free in your nose. You try to ignore it, but your breakfast is staring back at you, literally. 2 small pickled fish, eyes intact, resting on a slab of barley bread so hard you could use it as a roof tile. Welcome to the Byzantine diet. It keeps you alive. Barely. Food in the empire depends entirely on where you live, what season it is, and whether someone raided your pantry last week. If you're lucky enough to be near a coast or a river, you get fish. Not nice fish, mind you. Not tuna or swordfish, which go straight to Constantinople. You get anchovies. Maybe herring if it's a feast day. Bread is the staple. It's what fills the gaps. Byzantine peasants often bake coarse loaves from barley, rye, or millet, depending on what didn't fail that year. If you're especially fancy, you might get wheat. But only if the tax collectors missed your field or got bribed with wine. Speaking of wine, it's everywhere. Even children drink watered-down wine because the water? Often not safe. In fact, your wine might also not be safe, but hey, at least it's festive. You grow used to its tang, the way it softens a harsh day or numbs a bad tooth. For protein, there's cheese. Salty, crumbly, goat or sheep. You eat it with onions. Lots of onions. Byzantine breath? A war crime. Quirky fact, some Byzantines believed garlic boosted not only health but courage. There's even a popular superstition that warriors should chew garlic before battle to frighten enemies. Imagine running into an army of onion garlic breathers yelling in Greek. Honestly, you'd surrender just to stop smelling it. Historians still argue whether the empire's frequent fasts improved health or masked food shortages. The Orthodox calendar includes over 180 days of fasting per year, which is half your life spent avoiding meat, dairy, and sometimes oil. It's not optional. Even peasants, who already eat barely enough, are expected to fast. Irony much. During fasts, you switch to lentils, beans, nuts, and olives. You tell yourself you're being pious. Mostly, you're being hungry. But food isn't just about eating. It's about rhythm. Life flows around markets, mealtimes, and feast days. The village market appears once a week, more if you're lucky. Vendors set up tables under cloth tarps, displaying baskets of figs, bruised apples, wrinkled lemons, and bundles of herbs that promise to cure everything from headaches to heartbreak. You once bought a suspicious sausage there. It tasted like hope and regret. You never bought it again. Salt is precious. So is honey. You trade for them carefully. 1 jar of honey can buy you a new pair of shoes, or a piglet. You haven't tasted sugar. That's a luxury for the capital, imported at great cost. But you have tried mulberry syrup. It stained your hands purple for a week and made you briefly popular with local bees. Spices? Almost non-existent. Pepper is rare, and cinnamon is mythical. You flavor your food with herbs, oregano, dill, mint. Sometimes, if you're daring, you try wild mustard greens. They bite back. Your neighbors grow what they can: cabbage, leeks, cucumbers. Tomatoes haven't arrived yet. Neither have potatoes. Don't even dream of chocolate. Your idea of dessert is honey-soaked bread with crushed walnuts on top. You eat it slowly, savoring every sticky, sweet bite, pretending you're a senator at the hippodrome. Occasionally, the tax collector arrives and takes a chunk of your harvest. You try to hide your best cheese rounds in the goat pen, under a pile of straw. You pray he's allergic to hay. But the empire doesn't always take. Sometimes, in good years, it gives. Grain shipments from Egypt, or what's left of it, make their way north. When they arrive in the capital, bread is distributed free to citizens. You, living far from Constantinople, only hear rumors. One man swore he saw a cart of white bread once. He wept. Your family has food rituals. A prayer before every meal. A moment of silence for the hungry. Your grandmother insists on tossing crumbs to the birds, for the saints, she says. You suspect it's just an excuse to watch the sparrows dance. Feast days are the best days. You light candles, wear clean linen, and eat until you're dizzy. Roasted lamb, thick stews, sweet wine. You share everything, sing songs that are older than the village itself, and tell stories about saints who lived on nothing but acorns and divine light. Still, you never forget that food is fragile. One frost, one drought, one locust swarm, and everything changes. You've eaten bark tea before. You've ground acorns into flour. Once, during a harsh winter, you traded your last pair of boots for a bucket of pickled turnips. You remember that winter every time you smell vinegar. You grow your own herbs in a cracked pot near your window. Basil, thyme, maybe a bit of parsley. It makes your stew taste like home. You crush the leaves between your fingers and let the scent linger. It reminds you that you're still here, still surviving. Late at night, you dream of sweet milk and fresh peaches. In your dreams, the bread is soft and the fish don't stare. But when you wake, it's barley and onions again. Maybe with garlic. If you're lucky. And yet, somehow, it's enough. You share your meal with your family, pass the wooden bowl around, and listen to your children laugh between mouthfuls. Hunger sharpens gratitude. And gratitude, oddly enough, makes things taste better. Just don't breathe too close to your neighbor. The garlic's doing overtime tonight. Your fingers ache from holding the spindle all morning. Wool threads, rough and uneven, tug at your fingertips. The hearth crackles beside you, but not for warmth, it's a makeshift stove for boiling dye. The smell of sheep grease and burnt vinegar clings to your tunic like an uninvited cousin. You're in the Byzantine home economy now, a world where every item is earned with time, calluses, and a whole lot of spit-polish effort. Life doesn't pause for industrial revolutions. In your world, if you want something, you make it. Fabric doesn't come from a shop, it comes from a sheep, then your hands, then a loom you share with your cousin twice a month. Clothing is patched until it dies of exhaustion. Even underwear gets a second life as window rags. If you're a woman, domestic life is your full-time job, night shifts included. Weaving, spinning, soap making, and child wrangling, yes, all of it unpaid, underappreciated, and somehow expected. Quirky fact: Byzantine housewives used ashes mixed with lye for soap. It worked, sort of. Your skin burns, but hey, at least you smell like judgmental pine trees now. If you're a man, the fields call. Or the workshop. Or the docks. From dawn till dusk, you shape, lift, build, or beg. You patch the roof with straw, shoe the mule with borrowed nails, and fix a squeaky cart wheel using sheer optimism. Historians still argue whether the average Byzantine peasant had more leisure time than modern workers. On one hand, no emails. On the other, you work every daylight hour and pray the candle lasts just long enough to finish that last patch of mending. Inside your home, it's cramped, but full of life. Walls made of mud brick or stone, depending on how lucky or wealthy you are. One room for sleeping, eating, arguing, and playing knucklebones. No privacy, just strategically hung cloths. Your neighbor knows when you snore. And when you don't. There's no indoor plumbing. A clay chamber pot sits under the bed. You empty it out back every morning, pretending not to gag. Bathing happens once a week. Maybe. More often if you live near a public bathhouse, less if you live in the middle of nowhere and the water's frozen. In winter, you rub down with olive oil and scrape it off with a strigil. It's like exfoliating with salad dressing. If you're in the city, the public baths are more than just soap and gossip. They're social centers. You hear politics, neighborhood drama, religious rumors. You also see that guy from the bakery who definitely skipped leg day. But if you live rural, and most Byzantines do, it's different. You heat water in a copper pot, then pour it over yourself while standing on a wooden pallet outside. Modesty. Optional. The goats have seen worse. Your home's decor is simple. Maybe a wooden icon on the wall, some dried herbs dangling from a rafter, and a clay oil lamp that smokes up the ceiling. Rugs are rare. Most homes have packed earth floors or maybe stone tiles if you're wealthy enough to bribe the local bishop's cousin. Furniture is sparse. A wooden bench, a stool or two, and a table that's more splinter than surface. Beds are straw-stuffed mattresses on wooden frames. Fleas are standard issue. You sleep in linen if you can afford it, wool if you can't, and both if winter decides to flex. The kitchen. That's just a corner near the hearth. Pots made from clay or, if you're splurging, bronze. You cook over open flame, managing heat with the precision of a nuclear technician. Too close, you scorch your stew. Too far, you undercook the lentils. And either way, someone's going to complain. Children aren't just part of the household, they're part of the labor force. By the age of 6, they're helping feed chickens, collect firewood, or wind yarn. Toys? A carved doll, maybe a hoop, if someone got creative. Most games involve dirt, imagination, and mild danger. And yet, there's warmth here. Songs sung while spinning thread. Stories passed down by candlelight. That one uncle who swears he saw St. George in a tree stump. The smell of fresh bread and wild thyme. The gentle click of bone dice rolling across the floor. Family gatherings are noisy, crowded, and full of advice you didn't ask for. Elders sit at the head of the table, telling stories about famines and miracles, and that time the donkey outran a tax collector. You laugh, because it's probably true. At night, when the fire dies down and the house creaks under the weight of silence, you hear the wind pressing against the shutters. You pull your cloak tighter, listen for wolves, and hope the roof holds. Outside, life is still dangerous. Inside, it's just manageable. You dream of small improvements, a better thatch, a sharper knife, an extra pair of sandals. You barter for nails like they're gold. You save broken plates to patch the oven. Nothing is wasted. Even broken combs become wall hooks. And once a year, if the harvest is good and the saints are smiling, you splurge on something absurd. A painted cup. A string of glass beads. A whole jar of honey you don't have to share. It sits on a shelf like treasure. You look at it when the days feel heavy. A reminder that beauty still lives here. Even in a world where your laundry freezes on the line and your dinner smells vaguely of goat. You trudge forward into the Byzantine Empire's relentless political maze, where palace intrigue is as deadly as any battlefield. Imagine the marble halls of Constantinople filled with whispered conspiracies, secret meetings in shadowed corridors, and alliances as fickle as the Mediterranean breeze. Here, emperors don't just rule, they survive a daily Game of Thrones, where friends can turn into foes overnight and poison is sometimes the quieter assassin. Life in the imperial court is a constant balancing act. One moment you're favored, showered with gold and silk, the next, you're exiled or blinded, a common punishment to make sure you can't threaten the throne anymore. Yes, they really thought blinding was a humane way to neutralize rivals. Historians still debate whether this cruelty was a political necessity or pure paranoia running wild. You probably didn't realize just how cutthroat Byzantine politics could be. There's the infamous Empress Theodora, who rose from circus performer to empress by sheer cunning and charm. Talk about a social climb with more twists than a Byzantine mosaic pattern. Then there's Emperor Justinian, obsessed with restoring Roman glory, but also paranoid enough to keep an eye on everyone, including his closest advisors. Daily life outside the palace? Not much safer. Factions within the city often erupted into violence. The famous Nika riots in 532, for example, where chariot racing gangs doubled as political mobs, nearly burning Constantinople to ashes. You can almost hear the roar of the crowd, smell the smoke and sweat mixing in the air, and feel the tension vibrating through every stone. Even the church wasn't spared from political games. Religious leaders wielded enormous influence, sometimes rivaling emperors, and theological disputes could spark unrest or even bloodshed. Historians still argue whether these religious conflicts were about faith or power grabs in ecclesiastical robes. So, as you walk the tightrope of Byzantine politics, keep your friends close, and your enemies closer. Because in this empire, a smile could be a trap, and trust was always a luxury you couldn't afford. You wake to shouting. Not the gentle morning murmur of a rooster or bells calling monks to prayer, but the shrill panic of neighbors scrambling for buckets. Fire. Again. Urban life in the Byzantine Empire often means crowded stone homes with wooden roofs, packed cheek to jowl in tight districts. You live in a world where fire codes are a charming future fantasy, and the fire brigade consists of whoever isn't asleep. The moment one cooking flame leaps to a neighbor's curtain, the whole block's at risk of becoming a smoky mess of ash and sobbing. In Constantinople, space is a luxury. The city tries to juggle a booming population with ancient Roman infrastructure. That means narrow lanes, no proper drainage, and markets crammed with stalls built from flammable cloth and dry timber. You pray for rain not just to grow wheat, but to prevent yet another neighborhood bonfire. Today, it's your street. The sky turns gray-black fast, and you grab whatever you can, your tools, a half-full water jug, and that cursed heirloom jar that leaks from the bottom. The crowd thickens as families pour into the streets, shouting names and tripping over dogs. Someone is wailing. Smoke clings to your tongue, and even your eyelashes sting. Historians still argue whether fires like these shaped urban policies or simply reinforced the Byzantine tolerance for chaos. There's debate over how much city rebuilding happened under emperors like Justinian due to repeated fires versus riots, earthquakes, or just imperial ego. Eventually, the fire dies, leaving behind an eerie silence. A few charred beams lean like forgotten soldiers. Your home. Gone. Just a blackened spot where your modest life once stood. And yet, again, you survive. You aren't alone. Rebuilding is almost a communal ritual. Within hours, neighbors offer cloth, bread, maybe even laughter. The resilience of the city is astonishing. After every blaze, Constantinople somehow stitches itself back together like a threadbare tunic, refusing to fall apart. That doesn't mean life gets easier. You now sleep outside on a mat near the cistern, with one eye open. Fires weren't the only disasters waiting to ambush the Byzantine dream. Floods come next. You'd think that being built by the sea would bring cooling breezes and fish dinners. Instead, it brings coastal storms, sewer overflow, and once in a while, tsunamis. Water levels rise in hours, turning bathhouses into swimming pools and alleys into shallow rivers filled with floating cabbage. And let's not forget earthquakes. You could be deep in prayer, head bowed, when the floor buckles under you. Columns fall like dominoes. Walls split. There's always a monk who sees this as divine judgment, a politician who blames a rival faction, and you, just trying to survive long enough to see another market day. The Hagia Sophia itself, that architectural marvel you've admired from a distance, has lost its dome more than once. Not from enemy catapults, but from the trembling of the earth. The empire rebuilds it each time, because the message must remain: this city endures. Oh, and if it's not fire, flood, or earthquakes, then it's the occasional riot. And trust me, these aren't just a couple of drunk guys swinging sticks. No, these are organized, furious, often politically fueled explosions of violence. One day you cheer for the blues, next day the greens. But if you cheer at the wrong moment, or the emperor backs the wrong side, you're suddenly in a mob of 10,000 angry citizens burning chariots, smashing statues, and storming palaces. Just ask the ghosts of those killed in the Nika riots, thousands slain within hours. Riots, like fire, were as Byzantine as mosaics. Quirky fact. Some residents kept wooden sandals near their beds, not for comfort, but in case they had to run barefoot across broken stone during a quake or rebellion. Practical fashion for apocalyptic mornings. By now, your survival toolkit includes a soaked rag for smoke, a friend who owns a donkey cart, and the patience of a saint. You sleep lighter. You hide small coins under floor tiles. You learn to keep moving when panic arrives. And yet, you stay. You rebuild. You sweep away ash, patch walls, and hold your breath every time thunder rolls over the horizon. Maybe it's a storm. Maybe it's just a chariot race going terribly, terribly wrong. But you're still here. Somehow. Ash-covered, but alive. You wake up one morning and for once, there's no fire, flood, or mob. Just the regular smell of goat dung, grilled onions, and the neighbor's baby howling like the sky's falling. So you dare to relax, until you hear the cough. It's not your cough. Not yet. But the man passing by outside has it, wet, rattling, and relentless. You've heard that cough before. Last time it swept through the city, your cousin lost all 3 of his children in a week. And now, it's back. You brace yourself. Plagues and illnesses are a recurring nightmare in the Byzantine Empire, especially in a city as dense and interconnected as Constantinople. You're crammed into narrow alleys, sharing water sources, eating food handled by a dozen unwashed hands, and sleeping 2 feet from someone who just coughed on their pillow. The worst of them all? The plague of Justinian. It hit like divine punishment, a monstrous wave of death that historians still debate in terms of scale and impact. Some say it wiped out nearly half the empire's population, others argue it was just a third. Either way, you would have noticed. You may not understand germs, but you know patterns. First, the rats multiply. Then, people get fevers. Next, the sores swell, sometimes on the neck, sometimes under the arms, and then, silence. Permanent silence. Doctors try, bless them. You've seen them wear garlic necklaces, wave bundles of herbs, or drill holes in skulls to release bad humors. One even suggests bathing in vinegar and then drinking what you bathe in. You pass. Instead, you stay home, burn incense, and mark your door with a sign blessed by the local priest. It's barely more effective, but it feels better than vinegar bath smoothies. And still, the plague doesn't care. Bodies pile up so fast, carts trundle by daily just to gather the dead. The cemeteries fill, so they dig mass graves. You help once, shovel in hand, face covered. You toss a body in, and it's someone you bought bread from last week. That night, you don't sleep. Quirky fact. People believed that the smell of rotting fruit could protect you. So yes, there are folks walking around with half-mushy melons tied to their belts. Desperate times, mushy measures. Even when there's no major outbreak, sickness never really leaves. Malaria lurks near marshes. Dysentery is a dinner guest if your water source gets too cozy with the latrine. Leprosy. Well, you've seen that too. There's a leper colony outside the city, filled with the ostracized and slowly decaying. You avoid it, but you hear the moans. Historians still argue whether the empire's emphasis on religious charity helped or hindered disease control. Sure, monks cared for the sick, but sometimes they gathered the ill into overcrowded sanctuaries where diseases spread like gossip in a bathhouse. And then there's the emperor's court, where you'd think access to wealth and clean marble floors might shield you from the rot. Nope. Even emperors caught it. Justinian himself was struck down by the plague, and though he recovered, his face bore scars that rumors claimed were marks of divine judgment. You learn to listen for symptoms. A weak voice. A hand that trembles. Eyes that sink too far into a skull. The illness speaks in subtle ways before it screams. By now, you've got your own rituals. You boil herbs when the neighbor coughs. You avoid crowded markets when you hear distant wails. You stash onions, always onions. You don't know why, but your grandmother swore by them. Sometimes you look out across the Bosphorus, wondering if those blue waters ever carried in the sickness. Ships came in daily from Egypt, Italy, Syria. Trade brought spices, silk, and fleas. Thanks, commerce. Still, you endure. The air clears. The coughing lessens. The birds sing again, only for the cat to pounce one mid-note, and that makes you laugh, because why not? You remember that the empire always limps forward. After each plague, there's rebuilding. New laws. Sometimes better water systems. A few more herbalists with wild theories. And always, a new crop of children growing up blissfully unaware that life will punch them in the face someday. But not today. Today, you feel fine. You eat a roasted onion. You sit in the sun. You even hum a little tune. Because in the Byzantine Empire, feeling fine for one whole day is basically a miracle. So far, you've survived riots, fires, bad bread, and multiple brushes with a plague that has worse manners than a goat in heat. But now, something more subtle stalks you. It doesn't arrive screaming through the streets or sloshing out of gutters. It creeps in, wraps around your bones, and never really lets go. Welcome to the Byzantine economy. You work. You sweat. You barter. And somehow, you're always broke. Maybe you're a cobbler, hammering out shoes that fall apart faster than you can make them. Or maybe you're a farmer outside the city, where you battle bad weather, tax collectors, and the occasional locust swarm, sometimes all three on the same Tuesday. If you're lucky, your trade earns you just enough to pay your dues and not starve. If you're really lucky, you marry someone with a cousin in the bureaucracy. Because here's the thing, being a bureaucrat in the Byzantine Empire is like having a golden spoon, dipped in honey, then wrapped in silk. These guys are the gatekeepers of money, grain, licenses, property records, and your very ability to stay out of debt. They don't sweat, they ink. They don't farm, they fine. And oh, the taxes. Land tax, hearth tax, market tax, window tax, breathing too loud tax. Okay, that last one's a joke, but barely. You remember the Chrysargeron, a brutal tax that targeted tradesmen and prostitutes alike, based not on income but on the very act of working. Want to make a living? Congratulations, you owe the emperor. Even children of artisans had to cough up coins once they reached puberty. The burden was so bad that some families literally maimed their kids to avoid paying. Historians still argue whether its repeal by Emperor Anastasius I in 498 was due to popular pressure, moral awakening, or just sheer administrative exhaustion. You sigh, staring at the one coin in your pocket. It's probably clipped, shaved at the edges by someone desperate enough to commit petty fraud, yet not bold enough for armed robbery. Don't judge. You've considered it. An inflation. You wouldn't call it that, because you don't have the vocabulary. But you notice that bread cost 1 coin last month, and now it's 2. Or the baker's just greedy. Either way, you mumble under your breath about the price of dough rising faster than Jesus himself. Meanwhile, the state's coffers fluctuate with war. A bad year at the front lines means a good year for tax hikes. Soldiers need pay. Forts need building. Walls need repair. Who pays for that? You do. Even if you've never held a sword longer than your bread knife. Corruption seeps in, too. Some officials demand bribes just to process paperwork. Others lose records unless you grease their palms. There's a whole class of middlemen who survive off the grease economy. Sneaky, whispery fellows who know the right doors to knock on and the wrong ones to avoid. And yet, there's beauty in the system. Gold coins called solidus glint like captured sunbeams. Merchants crisscross the empire carrying spices, silks, even polar bear fur. No joke, some emperors had a taste for exotic luxuries. You've seen ships unload strange fruits from Africa and delicate glassware from Syria. For a moment, you feel connected to something grand, like your tiny, aching existence actually supports the dazzling machinery of empire. Then the tax agent shows up again. You protest, gently, because last time someone protested too loudly, their house accidentally caught fire. You plead. He nods, scribbles something, and leaves. You're not sure if you just avoided a fine or earned a summons. You fantasize about joining a monastery. They eat porridge and sing all day. Best of all, no taxes. Well, mostly, unless you own land, or livestock, or breathe too loud again. Quirky fact for you, Byzantine beggars sometimes claimed fake religious visions to boost their income. The Virgin Mary told me you should give me your lunch. Yeah, you've heard that one before. One day, you hear that Emperor Basil II, the so-called Bulgar Slayer, has left behind a treasury overflowing with gold, so massive that later emperors live off it for decades. You blink. That kind of wealth is real. Somewhere in a palace vault, there's a room lined with coins while you eat stale lentils and pray your roof doesn't collapse in the rain. Still, you adapt. You learn to mend, scavenge, stretch every crumb. You form secret pacts with neighbors, sharing tools, food, gossip. You hide silver in your sock. You laugh when the market lady throws in an extra onion just because you made her giggle. And sometimes, just sometimes, you dream that one day your child might escape this grind. Marry well. Enter the church. Get a post in some sleepy provincial office where the tax laws are looser and the wine flows cheap. But for now, you carry on. You work by candlelight. You cough over your account records. You invent new swear words for bureaucrats that would make a monk blush. Because in the Byzantine Empire, surviving the economy takes more creativity than surviving a battle. Just when you think the worst is behind you, after all, how much more suffering can one person take? The heavens open up. Not with rain or locusts this time, but with divine bureaucracy. You've wandered into the great Byzantine spiritual maze, the church. It's not just a place of worship, it's a force, an institution, a living, breathing organism that dictates not just your Sundays, but your diet, your thoughts, your marriage, your afterlife. Miss a fast day and suddenly you're a moral failure. Forget to cross yourself correctly and your neighbor squints suspiciously at your soul. The church here isn't merely spiritual, it's imperial. Remember that whole bit about the emperor being God's chosen? Yeah. The lines between Caesar and Christ are so blurred that even the icons look confused. The emperor rules by divine right, crowns himself with the patriarch watching, and then turns around and dictates church doctrine. Some call it Caesaropapism, a fancy word meaning, basically, one guy runs everything. And if you thought taxes were complicated, wait until you see the theology. The biggest debate of your time? Whether Jesus had one nature or two. Just one divine human mix, monophysitism, or two distinct but united natures, diophysitism. Doesn't sound like a hill to die on, right? Wrong. Whole provinces go up in flames over this. Cities riot. Monks brawl. Fistfights in the name of Christ. Historians still argue whether the common folk truly understood the doctrine, or just picked a side based on local loyalties, catchy slogans, or whichever priest offered better wine. You just try to nod in agreement whenever anyone brings it up. You learned that after your cousin was punched by a guy in a black robe shouting, "One nature forever," over a bowl of lentils. Icons are everywhere, gilded, weeping, carried into battle, kissed until the paint fades. Some say they work miracles. Others say they're idols. And so begins the iconoclasm crisis, when emperors like Leo III decide all religious images must go. Down come the mosaics, out go the icons, and up go the flames. You don't dare hang a saint's painting in your home without risking a visit from imperial agents. Then, suddenly, it reverses. Icons are back in. You dig your old ones out of the cellar, clean off the cobwebs, and pretend you never doubted. In truth, faith in Byzantium is both a bomb and a battlefield. You go to church because you must. You confess sins you barely understand. You light candles, kiss relics, stand for hours through incense-heavy chants that seem to stretch into eternity. And somewhere in there you feel something. A warmth. A stillness. A crack of light in the daily gray. But don't forget the rules. Lent lasts 40 days, with no meat, dairy, or joy. Fasting days pop up like weeds, over half the calendar, if you count them all. You start to wonder if God really minds whether your soup has oil in it. And heaven help you if you're a woman with ideas. The church teaches modesty, submission, and silence. Your role is to marry, serve, or cloister yourself away. Some women do become abbesses, formidable, respected, but most simply disappear behind veils and expectations. Still, saints are everywhere. Some lived in caves, surviving on moss and visions. Others supposedly walked across rivers or healed plague victims with a single breath. One eccentric fellow even lived atop a stone pillar for decades, refusing to come down. You visit his old site once, stare up at the sky, and think, honestly? I kind of get it. Religion here is not optional, it's the air you breathe. Even criminals plead their case by swearing oaths before relics. You know of one man who escaped execution by hiding in a church for 30 days, living off bread passed through a window, until his would-be killers gave up. Sacred ground trumps secular law. And yet, politics and faith tangle like ivy vines. One patriarch is exiled for offending the emperor. Another refuses to accept papal authority from Rome. You start to hear whispers about a great schism, a growing rift between Eastern Orthodoxy and Western Catholicism. But that's someone else's problem. You've got your own. Your priest just raised the fee for baptisms, and your cousin's baby is due next week. There are fringe elements too. Heresies bubble up, Paulicians, Bogomils, groups with weird doctrines about rejecting materialism or claiming Satan made the world. Some get crushed by imperial troops. Others slink into mountain hideouts and pass down their beliefs in whispered songs. And let's not forget the holy relic industry. Want a splinter of the true cross? A bone from St. John? A feather from the Archangel Gabriel's, wing? For the right price, anything's possible. Pilgrims travel hundreds of miles to kiss a foot, a tooth, or a robe fragment. You begin to suspect not every relic is entirely authentic, but you nod reverently anyway, just in case. Your own spiritual life is a mix of fear, awe, and routine. You mutter prayers while stirring stew. You trace the cross over your chest before opening a window in a storm. You kiss the icon near your bed every night, even if the wood is cracked and the saint's eyes are crooked. Because in this empire, salvation isn't just personal, it's public. It's political. And it's always watching. So here you are, standing at the edge of the Byzantine world's twilight, feeling the weight of centuries of hardship and hope pressing down on your shoulders like a cloak soaked in the Mediterranean sun. After all the wars, plagues, betrayals, and religious turmoil, life in the empire never really got easier. It just changed shape, like the shifting mosaics that adorn the great churches. By the time the empire limps into its final centuries, you're dealing with new invaders, the Turks at the gates, the Venetians in the markets, and the Ottoman guns pounding your walls. You watch the once great Constantinople shrink from bustling capital to a city under siege, its marble palaces crumbling under cannon fire, its once bustling harbors choked by blockades. And you're caught in the middle, a Byzantine soul holding on to the past as the future barrels toward you like a runaway chariot. But there's a strange resilience here. Even in the face of collapse, the empire's culture endures, through art, literature, and faith. The great libraries burn, but scribes copy ancient texts by candlelight in remote monasteries. The last emperors wear their crowns with a stubborn pride, holding court beneath the fading glow of golden domes. The Orthodox Church keeps the flame alive, its liturgies echoing in shadowed cathedrals. You think about how brutal life has been, the endless cycles of famine and plague, the grinding poverty for most, the ever-present threat of war and political intrigue. You remember the sweat-soaked days digging aqueducts, the nights spent huddled in cramped quarters praying for safety. You recall the smell of incense masking the stench of the city streets, the whispers of heresy, the cries of children, the heavy, slow thud of empire's heartbeat faltering. Yet, despite all that, you also remember the moments of beauty, the shimmer of gold tesserae in a mosaic, the soft chant of monks at dawn, the thrill of a market alive with color and sound. You remember the stubborn humanity, the way ordinary people found laughter in the darkest times, crafting stories and jokes that survived long after emperors and armies faded into dust. Historians still argue whether Byzantium was doomed from the start or simply the victim of changing times and tides. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was a world too complex, too proud, too fragile. Or maybe it was just brutally real, like life itself. And so you close your eyes, imagining yourself walking through those ancient streets one last time, feeling the cool marble beneath your feet, hearing the distant bell tolling, smelling the salty breeze from the Bosporus. You breathe in the stories, the struggles, the spirit of a people who lived and died under the shadow of empire. No, you probably wouldn't survive there. But for tonight, as the lights dim and the fan hums softly in the background, You carry a piece of that world with you. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Now, as your thoughts drift gently from the grandeur and grime of Byzantium, allow yourself to soften. Let the echoes of clashing swords and whispered prayers fade into a quiet hum. Picture the flicker of candlelight dancing on ancient stone, the slow turning of dusty pages in a forgotten monastery. There's comfort in the persistence of stories, in the way they outlast empires and kings, in the shared humanity beneath centuries of hardship. Breathe deeply. Feel the steady rhythm of your own heartbeat, a reminder that you are here now, safe and warm. Let the lessons of history settle like soft dust, reminders of resilience, of complexity, of the enduring flicker of hope even in brutal times. Rest now, as the night wraps around you like a gentle cloak, carrying you away from distant struggles into the peaceful quiet of sleep. Tomorrow is a new day, with its own stories waiting to be written. Sweet dreams.